Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Two Voices English podcast. I'm Mia, and as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Leo. How are you today, Leo?
I'm doing great, Mia. I'm actually feeling very energized because today we are talking about one of my favorite topics in the whole world. It's not just about English, it's about how our brains work and how we can achieve big goals without feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. You know, many of our listeners send us messages saying things like, Mia, Leo, I want to speak English perfectly, but I have a full-time job. I have kids, and I'm just so tired at the end of the day. How can I find 4 hours to study?
And my heart goes out to them, really, because the truth is, if you try to find 4 hours a day to study, you are probably going to fail. Not because you aren't smart or motivated, but because life is busy. The secret isn't doing big things occasionally, it's doing tiny things consistently.
That is the power of small habits. I remember when I started learning my second language, I bought all the thickest grammar books, I subscribed to 5 different websites, and I promised myself I would study every night after dinner. Do you know how long that lasted, Leo?
Let me guess, 3 days?
You're being generous. It lasted exactly 2 nights. On the third night, I was tired. There was a good movie on TV, and I thought, I'll do double tomorrow. But tomorrow never came.
That's the trap. We think of learning English as this giant mountain we have to climb in one day, but you don't climb a mountain in one jump. You do it step by step. We want our listeners to focus on just 15 to 20 minutes a day. That's it.
Some people might think 15 minutes, that's nothing. I can't learn a language in 15 minutes. But let's look at the math. Leo, you love numbers, right?
I do. Think about it this way. If you study for 15 minutes every single day, that is nearly 2 hours a week. In a year, that is over 90 hours of focused English practice. Now, compare that to someone who says they will study for 5 hours every Sunday, but gets tired and ends up doing it only once a month. The person doing 15 minutes a day wins every single time.
It's about building a neural pathway in your brain. When you hear or speak English every day, your brain realizes, oh, this language is important for my daily life. It starts keeping those words in your active memory. If you only study once a week, your brain thinks it's just a random event and forgets most of it.
And there's a psychological trick here too, Mia. It's called the 2-minute rule. If you feel too lazy to study, just tell yourself, I will only do 2 minutes of English today. Usually the hardest part is just starting. Once you open the book or start the podcast, you realize it's not that bad and you end up doing 15 or 20 minutes anyway.
That's a great tip. I use that for the gym, too. I tell myself I'll just go and walk for 5 minutes, and then I end up staying for an hour. But for English learners, the key is to make these 15 minutes enjoyable. It shouldn't feel like a punishment.
Right, it should be the best part of your day. Maybe it's listening to music and reading the lyrics, or watching a short video about a hobby you love, but in English. If you like cooking, watch a recipe video in English. If you like football, listen to a match commentary.
Exactly. This creates a positive connection in your mind. English becomes a tool for fun, not just a subject in a classroom. But Leo, even with 15 minutes, people sometimes get stuck because they don't know what to do in that time. They open a dictionary and just stare at it.
Oh, definitely don't just stare at a dictionary. That's the fastest way to fall asleep. In this series, we are going to break down exactly what those habits should look like, from how you listen to how you think in English.
I'm so excited to get into the details. The first step is just making the decision. I am going to give English 15 minutes of my day, no matter what.
That's the foundation. Once you have that foundation, we can start building the rest of the house. And speaking of building, the next thing we need to talk about is how to surround yourself with the language without even leaving your house. You know, Mia, earlier we mentioned surrounding yourself with the language. I often hear people say, Leo, I can't speak English well because I don't live in the UK or the USA. I don't have anyone to talk to here.
I hear that all the time too. But honestly, in 2026, that is just an excuse. We live in a digital world. You don't need to buy a plane ticket to live in an English-speaking environment. You can create your own English island right in your living room.
I love that term, English island. It makes it sound like a vacation. So, how do we start building this island? What's the first step?
Well, let's start with the thing we touch about 2,000 times a day, our smartphones. If you want to learn English, the very first thing you should do is change your phone's language settings to English.
Oh, that's a classic move, but it's so effective. At first, it's a bit scary. You want to change your alarm or find a photo, and suddenly everything says settings, display, or storage. But after 2 days, your brain stops translating and just knows what those words mean.
Exactly. You learn technical English without even trying. And it's not just the phone. Think about your social media. If you spend an hour a day scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, make sure at least half of the accounts you follow are English speakers. Follow a chef, a gamer, or a news channel in English.
That's a great point. It makes English part of your passive life. But what about the physical world? I remember when I was a student, my entire apartment was covered in little yellow sticky notes.
I did that too. I had a note on the fridge, a note on the mirror, and even a note on the microwave. My roommates thought I was crazy.
It looks funny, but it works. Every time you go to get a glass of water, you see the word faucet or cupboard. You are teaching your brain to connect the physical object directly to the English word, instead of translating it from your native language.
That is the key, Leo. We want to stop the translation process in our heads. Translation is slow, recognition is fast. Another thing I suggest to people is background listening.
You mean like having the radio on while you cook?
Exactly. Even if you aren't listening carefully, just hearing the rhythm, the sounds, and the intonation of English while you are doing the dishes or cleaning the house is very helpful. Your ears get sharper. You start to recognize where one word ends and the next one begins.
I agree. It's like music. You don't always need to analyze the lyrics to enjoy the song. But I have to ask Mia, doesn't this get exhausting? If everything is in English, doesn't your brain get tired?
It can, especially at the beginning. That's why it's important to find things you actually enjoy. If you hate the news, don't watch the news in English. Watch a comedy show or a vlog about gardening if that's what you like. The goal is to make English the background music of your life.
The background music of your life. I like that. It turns the struggle into a lifestyle. And once you have the language coming in through your ears and eyes, the next big challenge is getting it out through your mouth.
Oh, speaking. That's the scary part for everyone. But you don't actually need a partner to start practicing your speaking skills.
So, Mia, we just talked about making English the background music of our lives, but there is a big wall that most learners hit. They listen, they read, they understand, but then when it's time to speak, their mind goes completely blank. It's like their tongue is tied in a knot.
I know that feeling so well. It's the silent period of language learning. You have all the information in your head, but the bridge to your mouth is broken. People always say, I need a native speaker to practice with. But what if you don't have one? What if you are shy?
That's exactly the point. You don't actually need another person to start training your speaking muscles. Think about it. English is a physical skill, like playing the piano or playing football. You need to train your mouth muscles to make sounds that don't exist in your native language.
Exactly. And my favorite way to do this, and I promise it sounds crazy, but it works, is self-talk. I want everyone listening to try this. When you are alone at home, maybe you are making a sandwich or getting ready for bed, just describe what you are doing in English.
I am taking the bread. I am looking for the cheese. Oh, where is the knife? Ah, here it is. Like that?
Exactly like that. It sounds simple, but you are forcing your brain to find words quickly without the pressure of someone else watching you. There is no judgment. If you make a mistake, who cares? It's just you and the sandwich.
I actually do this in the shower, Mia. I have full arguments with myself in English. I pretend I'm being interviewed on a famous talk show. So, Leo, how does it feel to be the world's most famous podcast host? And then I answer myself.
I love that. It builds fluency because you're practicing the flow of the language. But there is another technical habit that is even more powerful. It's called shadowing. Have you ever heard of it, Leo?
Oh, I love shadowing. It's a game changer. For our listeners who don't know, shadowing is when you listen to a native speaker, like us, for example, and you repeat exactly what they say while they're saying it. You're like a shadow, just a split second behind.
Right. You aren't just repeating the words, you're copying the emotion, the speed, the pauses, and the melody of the sentence. English is a very rhythmic language. Some parts are long, some parts are short. If you just read from a book, you might sound like a robot, but if you shadow a real person, you start to sound human.
And it fixes your pronunciation automatically. If you hear me say mountain and you try to say it at the same time, your brain will naturally try to match my sound. It's like singing along to your favorite song in the car. You don't think about the notes, you just match the singer.
That is a perfect analogy. And the best part is, you can do this with anything. You can shadow a YouTube video, a movie scene, or even this podcast. Just take 1 minute, just 60 seconds of audio, and try to shadow it 5 times in a row. You will be amazed at how much easier your mouth feels after that.
It really is about muscle memory. I remember when I first tried to say th sounds, my tongue felt like it was too big for my mouth. But after weeks of self-talk and shadowing, it became natural. Now I don't even think about it.
That's the goal. We want to move English from your thinking brain to your automatic brain. But Leo, there is one more thing. Even if you practice speaking, you still need words to say, and many people struggle with memorizing long lists of vocabulary.
Ugh, vocabulary lists. They are the enemy of fun, aren't they? I think we should talk about how to grow your vocabulary without ever opening a dictionary again.
That sounds like a dream. Let's dive into how to learn words in a way that actually sticks. Mia, we were just talking about speaking, but to speak, you need words. And this is where most students get really frustrated. They spend hours with a notebook, writing a word in their language, then the English word, and then they try to memorize it like a robot.
Oh, the bilingual list method. I think we've all been there, Mia. You have a list of 50 words, you test yourself, you get them all right on Monday, and then by Friday, they are all gone. It's like your brain has a delete button for boring information.
Exactly. And that's because your brain is smart. It doesn't want to keep useless information. A word without a story or a context is just a random sound. It has no hook to stay in your memory.
So, what's the alternative? How do we make those words stick like glue?
The first rule is never ever learn a single word alone. Always learn chunks.
Chunks, like pieces of chocolate.
I wish, but no. Language chunks are groups of words that naturally go together. For example, instead of just learning the word decision, you should learn the phrase make a decision. Or instead of just interested, learn I'm interested in.
That is so important, because if you just learn decision, you might say do a decision or take a decision, which sounds a bit strange in English. But if you learn the whole chunk, you sound more natural immediately. And you don't have to think about grammar. The grammar is already inside the phrase.
Precisely. And the second secret to vocabulary is emotional connection. If you learn the word hilarious because you saw it in a dictionary, you might forget it. But if you learn it because you are watching a comedy show and you couldn't stop laughing, your brain connects that word to the feeling of laughter.
That's why I always tell people to stop reading boring textbooks and start reading things they actually care about. If you love technology, read tech blogs. If you love fashion, follow fashion influencers. When you see a new word in a story you're interested in, it becomes a living word.
And don't try to learn every word you see. That's another mistake. If you are reading an article and you see 20 new words, just pick the 3 or 4 that seem the most useful. The words that you think, hey, I could use this in a conversation tomorrow.
I agree. Quality over quantity. I have a little ritual, Mia. Whenever I find a new cool word or phrase, I try to use it in 3 different sentences about my own life.
Give us an example.
Okay, let's take the phrase to look forward to. Instead of just writing the definition, I'll say, I'm looking forward to my coffee tomorrow morning. Then, I'm looking forward to the weekend. And finally, I'm looking forward to our next podcast episode. Now that phrase is mine. It belongs to my life, not just a book.
I love that. You are personalizing the language. It's no longer the English language, it's your English. And when something is yours, you don't forget it.
But even with the best words and the best phrases, there is still one big monster we have to face. It's the monster that stops people from using everything we've talked about today.
Are you talking about the fear of making mistakes?
Bingo, the perfectionist monster. We need to talk about how to kill that monster if we want to truly be fluent. Mia, we've given some great tips so far. Habits, immersion, speaking to yourself, vocabulary, but let's be honest. Even if someone knows 1,000 words and has the best apps, there is a monster that stands at the door and stops them from opening their mouth.
Oh, I know exactly which monster you mean. It's the perfectionist monster. It's that little voice in your head that whispers, "Don't say that, your grammar is wrong," or "Everyone will laugh at your accent."
Exactly. I see it all the time. I've met students who have studied English for 10 years. They can read complex medical journals, but they are terrified to order a pizza in English because they might use the wrong preposition. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And you know where this comes from, Leo? I think it comes from school. In school, mistakes are bad. If you make a mistake, you get a red mark on your paper. You lose points. So our brains are trained to think mistake equals failure.
But in the real world, mistake equals practice. Think about a baby learning to walk. The baby falls down 20 times a day. Do the parents look at the baby and say, "Oh, look at that failure. He fell again. He should just give up"?
Of course not. They cheer. They say, "Look, he took 2 steps." Language learning is the same. Every time you make a mistake and someone corrects you, or you realize it yourself, your brain creates a new, stronger connection. Mistakes are literally the data your brain uses to improve.
That's a great way to put it. Data for the brain. I have a secret for our listeners. As a native speaker, I make mistakes in English all the time. I forget words, I start a sentence and realize it doesn't make sense, and I start again. And you know what? No one cares.
Exactly. When you are talking to someone, their main goal is to understand you. They aren't sitting there with a red pen counting your grammar errors. They want to know your story, your ideas, and your feelings. If you use was instead of were, the world doesn't end.
I actually have a funny story about this. When I was learning a bit of Spanish, I wanted to say I was embarrassed about something, so I used the word embarazada. I thought it sounded the same, but in Spanish, embarazada means pregnant.
Oh no, so what happened?
Well, I told a whole group of people I am very pregnant instead of I am very embarrassed. Everyone laughed, of course, but then they helped me. I learned the right word and I never, ever forgot it again. That mistake was my best teacher.
That's the spirit. So how can our listeners kill this perfectionist monster? I have a rule called the 70% rule.
Tell me more.
The rule is, if people understand 70% of what you are saying, you are successful. Don't aim for 100%. If you aim for 100%, you will speak slowly, you will be nervous, and the conversation will be boring. But if you aim for 70%, you will be relaxed, you will be faster, and you will actually enjoy yourself.
I love that. Focus on the communication, not the perfection. English is a tool, not a trophy. You use a hammer to build a house. You don't just look at the hammer and polish it all day. Use your English to build connections with people.
That is so true. And once you stop worrying about being perfect, you suddenly have so much more energy to actually listen. And listening, really listening, is a skill that most people forget to practice.
You're right. Being a good speaker actually starts with being a strategic listener, and that involves more than just hearing sounds. Mia, we just spent a lot of time talking about how to overcome the fear of speaking, but there is another side to that coin. You can be the bravest speaker in the world, but if you don't understand what the other person is saying back to you, the conversation dies pretty quickly.
That is so true, Leo. I call that the black hole effect. You are having a great conversation, you feel confident, and then the other person says one single word you don't know. Suddenly, your brain stops. You start thinking, what did that word mean? Was it a verb? Was it an insult? And while you are thinking about that one word, you miss the next 5 sentences.
Exactly, you've fallen into the black hole. This happens to everyone, even advanced learners. The mistake we make is trying to translate every single word in our heads in real time. But listening to a language isn't like reading a book where you can pause and look at a dictionary. It's like a river, it just keeps flowing.
So, how do we stay afloat in that river? We need to become strategic listeners. This means we stop listening for words and start listening for meaning.
I love that distinction. Listening for meaning. How does that work in practice?
Well, first you have to look for key words. In any English sentence, about 40% of the words are just glue. Words like the, is, at, or of. They don't carry much meaning. The real meat of the sentence is in the nouns and verbs. If someone says, I, yesterday, park, dog, ran, your brain can easily fill in the gaps. You know exactly what happened.
Right, you don't need to hear I went to the park with my dog and he ran. The key words tell the story. Another huge part of strategic listening is paying attention to intonation and body language.
Oh, absolutely. In English, we use our voices like musical instruments to show what is important. We stress the most important words. If I say, I never said he stole the money, it means something very different than if I say, I never said he steal the money.
That's a brilliant example. The melody of the sentence gives you clues about the speaker's emotion and intent. Are they happy? Are they complaining? Are they asking a question? Even if you don't know the vocabulary, the vibe of the voice tells you half the story.
And here's a secret weapon for our listeners. It is perfectly okay to ask for help. Many learners feel ashamed to say, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Or what does that word mean? But actually, native speakers love it when you ask. It shows you're really listening and you care about what they're saying.
I agree. I usually use phrases like, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that, or could you say that again a bit more slowly? It's much better than just smiling and nodding while you have no idea what is happening. That's how you end up agreeing to something you don't want to do.
Do you want to go swimming in the frozen lake? Oh, yes, yes. And then you realize what you said. No, don't do that. Be an active participant. If you miss a word, let it go. Focus on the next one.
It's a bit like watching a movie in a foreign language without subtitles. At first, it's just noise, but then you start to see patterns. You see the actor's face, you hear the music, you see the setting, and suddenly you understand the scene.
That's why I always suggest active listening practice. Don't just have English in the background. Sometimes sit down for 5 minutes, listen to a short clip, and try to write down the main idea. Not every word, just the big picture.
Big picture listening is a superpower, and once you get good at understanding the big picture of what others are saying, something magical happens. You start to notice that you aren't translating in your head anymore. You start to actually think in the language.
Oh, thinking in English. That is the holy grail of language learning. Some people think it's impossible, but it's actually a habit you can build. Mia, Leo, we left off with a very exciting topic, the holy grail, as you called it, thinking in English. I think many of our listeners believe that this is something that only happens after 10 years of living in London or New York. They think one morning you just wake up and poof, your brain is English.
I wish it worked like a magic spell, Mia. Abracadabra, now you think in English. But sadly, no. However, I have good news for everyone listening. Thinking in English is a skill you can and should start practicing from day one, even if you only know 10 words.
I completely agree. People often ask me, Mia, how do I stop translating in my head? And my answer is always the same. You have to starve the translator. If you keep giving the translator work, it will never leave. You have to force your brain to go directly from the object or the idea to the English word.
Starve the translator. I love that. So, how do we do it? For me, it started with very simple internal labeling. When I was walking down the street, I would look at things and just say the English word in my head. Tree, car, blue sky, fast dog. I didn't say that is a tree, just tree.
Exactly. You're connecting the visual image directly to the sound of the English word. No middleman, no translation. Another great way to build this habit is to use a monolingual dictionary. This is a big one, Leo.
Oh, this is a huge step for many students. It's scary to move away from your native language dictionary, but when you look up an English word and read the definition in English, you are staying inside the English bubble. You are learning to explain concepts using the words you already know.
It prevents that mental flip-flopping between languages. If you look up the word giant and the definition says a very, very big person, you just learned a new word using simple words you already knew. Your brain stays in English mode.
And then there's the daily narrative technique. This is like the self-talk we mentioned earlier, but it's silent. It's the voice in your head. Instead of thinking, I need to go to the supermarket later, try to think, I need to go to the store. I need milk and eggs.
I do this when I'm planning my day. I sit with my coffee and I think, okay, Mia, first email, then podcast recording, then lunch with Sarah. By doing this, you're making English the language of your intentions and your logic.
It's about building a new highway in your brain. At first, the highway is small and has a lot of traffic. It's difficult to drive on, but the more you use it, the smoother and wider it becomes. Eventually, your brain will realize that the English highway is actually faster than the translation bridge.
That's a perfect way to describe it. But what happens when you hit a roadblock? What if you are thinking in English and suddenly you don't know the word for stapler or frustrated?
That's where circumlocution comes in. That's a fancy word, isn't it? It just means talking around the word. If you don't know the word for stapler, think the thing that puts paper together. If you can't find the word frustrated, think, I feel bad because this is difficult.
This is actually what native speakers do. When I forget a word, and I forget words all the time, I don't stop talking. I just describe the thing. By doing this in your head, you keep the English momentum going. You don't let the translator monster come back and take over.
It really is about momentum. The more minutes you spend thinking in English, the more natural it feels. And soon, you'll notice something amazing. You'll be watching a movie or talking to a friend, and you'll realize you haven't thought about your native language for 20 minutes.
That is the best feeling in the world. It's like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. You are finally free in the language. But Mia, to reach that level of freedom, we also need to talk about how we handle the things we read and watch, because thinking in English is much easier when you're consuming the right kind of content.
You're right. We need to talk about input, but not just any input. We need to talk about comprehensible input.
Leo, we've talked about thinking, speaking, and listening, but let's talk about the fuel for all of that, the things we read and watch. I see so many students make the same mistake. They are beginners, and they try to watch the movie Inception or read a Shakespeare play in the original English.
Oh boy, that's like trying to run a marathon before you can walk. It's not just difficult, it's actually useless. If you understand 0% of what you are hearing, your brain just treats it like noise. It's like listening to birds singing. It's pretty, but you aren't learning bird language.
Exactly. There's a famous linguist named Stephen Krashen who came up with a brilliant idea called comprehensible input. He says we only learn a language when we understand the message. He uses a simple formula, I plus 1.
I love a good formula. Explain it to us, Mia. What is I and what is 1?
I is your current level, everything you already know, and the plus 1 is just a little bit of new information. The goal is to find content where you understand about 80 to 90% of what is happening, but there's 10% that is new or challenging.
That makes so much sense. If it's too easy, you get bored. If it's too hard, you get frustrated and quit. But if it's I+1, your brain is like a detective. It uses the 90% it knows to guess the meaning of the 10% it doesn't know. That is when real learning happens.
That guessing is the magic moment. That's how children learn. They don't have dictionaries. They see their mom point to a glass and say, "Water?" They know what a glass is, they see the liquid, so they guess that the sound water means the liquid.
So for our listeners, how do they find their I+1 content? In 2026, there are so many options.
Well, first, they should look for graded readers. These are books written specifically for English learners. They use a limited vocabulary, maybe only 500 words for level 1 or 2,000 words for level 4. It's much more satisfying to finish a whole book in English than to struggle with one page of a difficult novel.
I agree. And what about YouTube and podcasts?
Same rule applies. If you find a native speaker podcast too fast, look for English learner podcasts, like this one. We speak a bit more clearly, we use common words, but we still talk about interesting things. Also, YouTube is great because you have visual context. If you watch a cooking video, even if you don't know the word whisk, you see the person whisking the eggs. Your brain makes the connection automatically.
I have a 5-finger rule for our listeners when they choose a book or an article. Read one page. Every time you find a word you don't know, put up one finger.
Oh, I like this.
If you have 0 or 1 finger up, the book is too easy. If you have 5 fingers up before you finish the page, it's too hard. The sweet spot is 2 or 3 fingers. That is your I+1.
That is a fantastic tip, Leo. And remember, input isn't just about learning words. It's about seeing how the language works naturally. It's about seeing where the adjectives go and how people start and end conversations.
It's like being a sponge. You're just soaking it all in. But Mia, eventually we have to talk about the boring stuff. The thing everyone loves to hate, grammar.
Grammar, everyone's favorite subject. But there is a habit for grammar that doesn't involve memorizing rules from a textbook.
I'm intrigued. Let's talk about how to master grammar without losing our minds.
Okay, Leo, we have to do it. We have to talk about the G word.
The G word? You mean grammar?
Shh, not so loud. You'll scare the listeners away. But seriously, why does everyone hate grammar so much? Whenever I say the word grammar in a classroom, I see students start to look sleepy or stressed immediately.
I think it's because of how we were taught. In school, grammar is often treated like a fence. It's a set of strict rules telling you what you can't do. Don't do this, don't say that. You forgot the S at the end of the verb, -5 points. It feels like a trap.
You're right, but I prefer to think of grammar as a map. If you are in a new city, you don't have to use a map, but it sure makes it easier to find the museum or the best pizza place. Grammar is just the logic of the language. It's there to help you be understood, not to punish you.
That is a much better way to see it. So how do we build a grammar habit without staring at boring charts and tables for hours?
The secret is pattern recognition. Think about how you learned your first language. Did your parents sit you down when you were 2 years old and say, "Okay, Leo, today we are going to study the present perfect continuous"?
Of course not. I didn't even know what a verb was until I was 8. I just listened. I heard my parents say things thousands of times, and my brain started to notice the patterns. My brain realized that if I want to talk about yesterday, the words sound a certain way.
Exactly. Your brain is a pattern-seeking machine, and the best way to feed that machine is through the input we talked about in the last episode. When you read a story or listen to a podcast, you are seeing grammar in the wild. You are seeing it actually working.
So if I see the phrase, I have been working in 10 different stories, my brain starts to understand the feeling of that tense, even if I don't know the formal name for it.
Precisely. In fact, many native speakers don't know the names of the tenses. If you ask a man on the street in London, "Excuse me, could you explain the third conditional to me?" He will probably look at you like you're crazy, but he uses it perfectly every day.
That's so true. I have a tip for our listeners. Stop trying to memorize the names of the rules. Focus on the usage. Instead of studying the past simple, study how to tell a story about my last vacation. The grammar will come naturally because you need it to tell the story.
I love that. Goal-oriented grammar. And here's another trick. When you find a grammar point that is difficult, like in, on, and at, don't just read the rule. Find anchor sentences.
Anchor sentences, what are those?
An anchor sentence is a simple, correct sentence that you memorize perfectly. For example, I am at home, in the kitchen, sitting on a chair. Whenever you are confused about those prepositions, you just remember your anchor. You compare your new sentence to your anchor. It's like a compass for your brain.
That's brilliant. It's much easier to remember a real-life situation than a list of abstract rules. And another thing, don't try to learn all the grammar at once. 90% of daily English uses only about 20% of the grammar rules. Master the big three, present, past, and future, and you can already have amazing conversations.
Exactly. Be a grammar minimalist. Get the basics right, be confident, and let the complex stuff arrive slowly over time as you read and listen more. Don't let a comma stop you from speaking to a friend.
Well said, Mia. But even with good grammar and a big vocabulary, there is one more thing that makes you sound real. It's something that isn't in textbooks at all.
Ah, you mean culture and slang, the secret seasoning of a language.
Exactly. Let's talk about why knowing the culture is just as important as knowing the words.
Leo, we have built a beautiful house so far. We have the foundation of habits, the walls of vocabulary, and the map of grammar. But a house is just a building until you put furniture and decorations inside. In language, that decoration is culture and idioms.
I love that analogy, Mia. I remember a student of mine who was very good at English. His grammar was perfect. One day, he was working on a project with a colleague in London, and the colleague said, "Don't worry about that report. It's a piece of cake."
Oh no, let me guess.
Exactly. My student looked at him completely confused and said, "But I don't see any cake. I'm hungry, but I need to finish the report first."
That is the perfect example of why the dictionary isn't enough. If you only know the literal meaning of words, you are going to be very confused in an English-speaking environment. Idioms like piece of cake, under the weather, or break a leg are used every single day. They are the secret seasoning that makes the language taste real.
But it's not just about learning funny phrases, it's about understanding the culture behind the words. Language and culture are like two sides of a coin. You can't separate them. For example, how we use politeness in English can be very different from other languages.
That's a great point. In some cultures, being direct is a sign of honesty, but in English, especially in the UK, we use a lot of softeners. Instead of saying, "Give me that pen," we say, "I was wondering if I could possibly borrow your pen for a second."
It's like a song. You have to dance around the question. If a learner doesn't know this cultural habit, they might sound rude without meaning to be. They aren't bad people, they just haven't learned the social grammar of the language.
So, how can our listeners develop this cultural ear? My favorite habit for this is watching sitcoms, situational comedies, shows like Friends, The Office, or Modern Family.
Why sitcoms specifically?
Because they're based on daily social interactions. You see how people apologize, how they tell jokes, how they disagree with their boss, and how they talk to their friends at a cafe. You see the facial expressions and the body language that go with the words. You see the culture in action.
And you hear the slang. Slang is like fashion. It changes every year. What was cool 2 years ago might be cringe today.
I always tell students you don't necessarily need to speak with a lot of slang, but you definitely need to understand it.
I agree. If you try too hard to use the newest slang, you might sound a bit unnatural. But if you hear a teenager say something is fire or lit, you need to know they mean it's great, not that something is burning. Exactly. My tip for this is contextual curiosity. When you hear a phrase that sounds strange, like he's pulling your leg, don't just ignore it, look it up. Use a site like Urban Dictionary or just search idiom meaning. But more importantly, look at who is saying it and when. That's the when is so important. You wouldn't use slang in a formal job interview, but you also wouldn't use very formal textbook English at a Friday night party with friends. Learning to switch your style is the true mark of a fluent speaker.
It's about being a social chameleon. You adapt to the environment. And this leads us to a very important question, Mia. How do we keep all of this organized? We're learning so much: habits, speaking, listening, grammar, culture. How do we make sure we don't get overwhelmed?
That is the perfect question for our next step. We need to talk about review and reflection, because learning is one thing, but keeping what you've learned is another challenge entirely.
I'm ready. Let's talk about how to make sure we never forget what we've worked so hard to learn.
Mia, we have talked about so many amazing things in this series. We've discussed habits, immersion, speaking, vocabulary, and even the scary world of grammar and slang. But I have a question for you. Have you ever spent an entire afternoon learning something new, feeling like a genius, and then the next morning you wake up and your mind is a complete blank?
Oh, Mia, you were describing my entire high school experience. It's what I call the leaking bucket problem. You pour all this fresh, clean water, which is the new English knowledge, into your head, but your head has small holes in the bottom. If you don't plug those holes, the water just leaks out, and you're left with an empty bucket.
That is a perfect metaphor. Scientists actually have a name for those holes. They call it the forgetting curve. A man named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered that we forget about 50 to 80% of what we learn within just 24 hours if we don't review it.
80%? That's terrifying. It means if you study for an hour on Monday and then do nothing until the next Monday, you've basically wasted your time. You're starting from zero every single week. No wonder people get frustrated and say, I'm just not good at languages.
Exactly. They aren't bad at languages. They are just fighting against biology without a plan. So the habit we need to build is strategic review. And the king of all review methods is something called spaced repetition.
I've heard of this. Is that the system where you review information at specific intervals, like right after you learn it, then a day later, then a week later, and then a month later?
Precisely. Instead of cramming, which is studying for 5 hours in one day, you space out your learning. Every time you review a word or a rule just before you are about to forget it, you push that information deeper into your long-term memory. Eventually, it becomes permanent. It's like building a bridge. You have to let the cement dry before you put more weight on it.
This is why apps like Anki or Quizlet are so popular, right? They use algorithms to show you the difficult words more often and the easy words less often. It makes your study time incredibly efficient. You aren't wasting time on things you already know.
Exactly, but you don't even need an app. You can do this with a simple notebook. Just spend the first 5 minutes of your 15 minutes of English habit looking at what you learned yesterday and the day before. That's it. It's a warm-up for your brain.
I love that. But there is another part to this, Mia. To stay motivated, you need to see that you're actually moving forward. When you're in the middle of the journey, it's easy to feel like you're standing still.
You're right. We need evidence of progress. I always suggest that learners keep a learning journal. Not a journal where you write grammar rules, but a journal where you record your small wins.
Small wins. Give me an example.
Well, maybe today you watched a YouTube video and you understood a joke without looking at the subtitles. That's a win. Write it down. Maybe you went to a cafe and ordered in English without shaking. That's a win. Write it down. Or maybe you just finished your 15 minutes of English on a day when you were really tired. That is a huge win.
I see. Because on the days when you feel like your English is terrible, and we all have those days, you can look back at your journal and see how far you've come. You can say, wait, 3 months ago, I couldn't even understand this podcast, and now I'm listening to part 11 and following every word.
That feeling of, look at me now, is the best fuel for your motivation. It turns English from a task into a success story. You are the hero of your own language journey.
I love that. We're all heroes in training. But Mia, we're almost at the end of our series. We've given the tools, the habits, and the mindset. There's only one thing left to talk about.
The finish line?
Actually, no, because in language learning, there isn't really a finish line. There's just the next adventure. Let's talk about how to keep the fire burning for the long term.
Mia, I can't believe it. We have reached the end of our series on effective habits. We've traveled through the world of immersion, we've fought the perfectionist monster, we've built our English islands, and we've even learned to love grammar. How do you feel?
I feel a little bit emotional, actually. It's been such a journey. But I'm also very proud of everyone who has stayed with us until this moment. Listening to 12 episodes of a podcast in another language is a massive achievement. If you are listening to my voice right now, you have already proven that you have the most important habit of all, persistence.
Persistence. That's the secret ingredient, isn't it? People often look for a shortcut or a magic pill to learn English in 30 days. But the truth is, the only shortcut is showing up every day, even on the days when you don't feel like it, especially on those days.
You're right. But Leo, we have to be honest with our listeners. There will be a time, maybe next week, maybe next month, when they feel like they aren't improving anymore. We call this the intermediate plateau. You feel like you are stuck in the middle of the ocean and you can't see the land.
Oh, the plateau is a dangerous place. Many people quit there because they don't see the rapid progress they saw at the beginning. But here is the thing. Beneath the surface, your brain is still working. It's organizing all that information. It's like a tree in winter. It looks like nothing is happening, but the roots are growing deep so it can bloom in the spring.
That is a beautiful way to put it. To get through those plateaus, you need to turn English from a task into a lifestyle. It shouldn't be something you do, it should be part of who you are. You aren't just a student, you are an English speaker. Even if you are still learning, you are already part of the global community of people who use this language to connect.
Exactly. Think about the doors that are opening for you. Because you decided to listen to these 15 minutes a day, you can now access millions of more books, movies, and ideas. You can talk to people from every country on Earth. English isn't just a set of sounds, it's a key to the world.
And remember, the journey never truly ends. Even I am still learning new words and phrases every day. That's the beauty of it. There is always a new song to understand, a new book to read, or a new person to meet. The goal isn't to finish English, the goal is to live in English.
So, our final piece of advice for everyone listening: be kind to yourself. Celebrate your progress. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Your journey is unique and you are doing great. Keep your 15-minute habit, keep your English island growing, and most importantly, keep having fun.
Because if it's not fun, it won't last. Find the stories that make you laugh, the music that makes you dance, and the topics that make you think. English is your tool. Use it to build a life you love.
Well, Mia, I think it's time. It has been an absolute pleasure sharing these tips and stories with you.
And it has been a pleasure being here with you, Leo. And to all our listeners, thank you for letting us be a part of your daily routine. We are so excited for your future.
Never stop exploring, never stop questioning, and never stop speaking.
Goodbye for now, everyone.
Happy learning!